They didn't shout. They didn't argue. They didn't even sound annoyed. They said it calmly, like they were commenting on the weather. "Mom, we really don't have time for this right now." That sentence landed harder than anything else they could have said. Not because it was cruel, but because it was final, like a door quietly closing. And in that moment, standing alone in my kitchen with my phone pressed against my ear, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't part of their lives anymore. I was an interruption. And that realization would change everything. My name is Margaret, and I was 72 years old when this happened. I'd lived in the same quiet Connecticut town for most of my life. I raised 3 children mostly on my own after my husband passed away years earlier. I worked for decades, sacrificed sleep, money, and dreams to make sure my kids had every opportunity I never did. And until that morning, I truly believed that counted for something. But let me take you back to the day it all started. It was early March, a Tuesday. The kind of morning that feels too quiet. I had just come back from a doctor's appointment with my younger sister, Elaine. She was pale, thinner than the last time I'd seen her, and trying very hard to smile. The doctor hadn't sugar-coated anything. Stage 4 cancer. Weeks, maybe months. As soon as I got home, I made tea, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at my phone for a long time before dialing my eldest daughter. I wasn't calling to complain. I wasn't calling for money. I wasn't calling to ask for favors. I just needed my child. And that's important to remember. After 3 rings, she answered. "Mom, I'm heading into a meeting." "I know, sweetheart," I said quickly. Something serious happened. It's about your aunt." There was a pause, a sigh. "Can this wait until the weekend?" "No," I said softly. "It really can't." Another pause, longer this time. "Mom, I really can't handle emotional stuff right now. I'll call you later." The line went dead. She didn't say goodbye. I sat there, phone still in my hand, telling myself she didn't mean it. She was busy, important job, stress. I'd made those excuses for my children for years. So I tried my son next. He answered, but his tone was already guarded. "What's wrong now, Mom?" That word now stung. I explained, slowly, carefully. I told him his aunt was dying and that I was scared, that I didn't know how to process it alone. His response came fast. "Mom, you call every time something goes wrong. I can't be your emergency contact for life. I've got kids, work, problems of my own." "This isn't a small thing," I whispered. "Then call someone else," he said. "I don't have the bandwidth for this drama. Handle it yourself." Handle it yourself. Those words echoed long after the call ended. Still, I tried one last time. "My youngest." Straight to voicemail. I left no message. I sat in that chair for hours, staring at nothing, replaying the conversations over and over. I thought about all the times I dropped everything for them. The late-night drives, the financial help I never mentioned, the years I put my own life on hold. And suddenly, I saw the pattern clearly. I was valuable when I was useful. I was loved when I was convenient. But when I needed something, I was a burden. That night, I didn't cry loudly. I cried quietly, the kind of crying that comes with understanding something you can't unsee. And that's when a thought crossed my mind, one I would have never allowed myself before. What if I stopped expecting anything from them? Not revenge. Not punishment. Just acceptance. The next morning, I woke up with a strange sense of calm. The house was still quiet. My phone was still empty. No missed calls, no apologies. And I realized something else. They weren't coming. So if I truly had to handle things alone, Then maybe it was time I handled everything alone, including decisions they assumed they'd one day control. And that decision, the quiet one I made that morning, would eventually bring all of them to my door, demanding answers they were not prepared to hear. But that's not what they expected. Not at all. I didn't change anything out of anger. I changed it because I finally saw the truth. And once you see it, you can't pretend anymore. I waited. Not dramatically. Not angrily. Just quietly. After that Tuesday, I stopped calling first. I told myself I was giving them space, that they'd call once things slowed down, that they'd remember their mother existed when life stopped racing for a moment. That moment never came. Days passed, then weeks. My sister Elaine's condition declined quickly. The woman who used to laugh too loudly and correct everyone's grammar now struggled to sit upright. I spent most mornings driving to her house, organizing medications, writing down appointment times, pretending I wasn't terrified. And every night, I went home alone. Not once did any of my children ask how she was doing. Not once did they ask how I was holding up. What they did do was text. Short messages, convenient messages. How are things? Hope you're okay. Busy week, talk soon. I learned quickly those messages weren't invitations to talk. They were placeholders, proof, at least in their minds, that they'd done enough. And every time I tried to say more, the conversation ended. One afternoon, while sitting beside Elaine's hospital bed, my phone buzzed. It was my son. I felt a flicker of hope. "Hey, Mom," he said. "Quick question." Not how are you? Not how, Aunt Elaine. A question. What's going to happen with the lake place eventually? I stared at the wall for a long moment before answering. What do you mean? Well, maintenance taxes, it's a lot for one person, just thinking ahead. Thinking ahead. While his aunt lay dying 10 feet away. We'll talk another time, I said quietly. Sure, he replied. Whenever. He hung up first. I didn't cry that time. Something inside me had started to shut down, slowly, carefully, like a door closing to protect what little was left. Elaine passed away 6 weeks later. 6 weeks. That's how fast life can collapse when it wants to. The night she died, I sat in my car outside my house for nearly an hour before going inside. I didn't want to face the silence. I didn't want to sit in a house that knew my grief but couldn't respond to it. I texted my children. She's gone. 2 replied hours later. I'm sorry, Mom. That's hard. Let me know if you need anything. Anything. I needed you before she died. The funeral was small, simple. Elaine wouldn't have wanted a spectacle. My children came, but they came like guests, polite, distracted, checking their phones, making sure to leave early. At the reception, my daughter hugged me briefly. This must have been really rough on you, she said. I nodded. And then she added, we should probably start talking about the future. Planning. That word again. Planning. It followed me like a shadow. After the funeral, the calls increased, but not the way I'd hoped. They didn't ask about my grief. They didn't ask if I was sleeping. They didn't ask if the house felt too empty. They asked about logistics. What would I do with Elaine's things? Was I keeping the lake house? Had I thought about downsizing? Every conversation circled the same topic, like vultures, pretending to be concerned. One night, I sat at my dining table with Elaine's old photo album open in front of me. She and I as little girls, summer smiles, sunburned noses, no expectations, no entitlement. That's when it hit me. My children weren't worried about losing me. They were worried about losing access. And that realization hurt more than anything else. A few days later, my youngest finally called. "I've been meaning to reach out," she said. "Work been insane." I listened. I didn't interrupt. She talked for 10 minutes about her job, her stress, her schedule. Then she paused. "So you okay?" I almost laughed. "Almost." "I'm managing," I said. "Well, you're strong," she replied. "You always handle things." There it was again. That phrase. Handle things. The same words that started everything. When the call ended, I sat in the dark, replaying that sentence. And for the first time, I didn't feel sad. I felt clear. The truth was simple, even if it hurt. They had moved on emotionally. They had built lives where I existed on the edges. And I was still living as if I mattered the same way. That mismatch, that illusion, was what was destroying me. So I did something I'd never done before. I stopped waiting. No more hoping they'd show up differently. No more assuming they'd change. No more organizing my life around their expectations. I opened my laptop, searched for a familiar name, and picked up the phone. Not to beg. Not to complain. But to plan. Quietly, carefully. And once that process started, there was no going back. I didn't tell them what I was about to do. I didn't ask permission. Because for the first time in my life, I was making a decision that was only about me. The office was quiet in a way that felt intentional. No ringing phones. No rushed footsteps. Just the soft ticking of a clock and the faint smell of old paper. I liked that. It felt like a place where decisions were meant to be taken seriously. I sat across from Mr. Calder, the attorney who had helped me years earlier when my husband passed away. He looked older now, a little grayer, but his eyes were the same, steady, observant patient. "So," he said gently, folding his hands, "what would you like to discuss today?" I took a breath. "I want to change everything." He didn't flinch. That was the first time I felt seen in months. I didn't rush into explanations. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I spoke slowly, carefully, like someone who had spent a long time thinking before finally speaking out loud. "I don't want my estate handled the way it currently is," I continued. "I want to make intentional choices, clear ones." Mr. Calder nodded. "That's your right." That sentence mattered more than he probably realized. Because for years, I'd lived as if my role was to support, to sacrifice, to smooth things over. As if my needs were always secondary to someone else's urgency. For the first time, someone reminded me I was allowed to decide. We reviewed the existing documents together. The house, the savings, the lake property my husband and I had bought decades ago, back when summers were long and the kids were small and happy. "All currently divided equally," he said. "That's fairly standard." "I know," I replied, "and that's the problem." I explained everything. Not dramatically. Not angrily. I told him about Elaine's illness, about the phone calls, about being told to handle it myself, about the silence that followed. "I'm not doing this to punish anyone," I said. "I just want my life to reflect the truth." He studied me for a long moment. "Truth has a way of simplifying things," he said. I nodded. The first decision surprised even me. "The lake house," I said. "I want it to go to my niece." He raised an eyebrow slightly, not in judgment, just curiosity. "She was there," I explained. "Not for the property, for her mother, for me. She still calls, she still visits. She loves that place for what it is, not what it's worth." That mattered. Because the lake house wasn't just a building. It was memory. It was laughter. It was my husband's voice echoing off the water. It deserved to belong to someone who respected that. We continued. Charitable trusts, education funds, causes that reflected the life I actually lived, not the one people assumed I did. And my children, he asked gently. I paused. They should receive something, I said, but it needs to be clear, deliberate, no confusion. We discussed it carefully, thoughtfully. Nothing rushed. In the end, the decision was simple. Enough to acknowledge them. Not enough to reward entitlement. May I ask something? Mr. Calder said after a moment. Of course. Are you prepared for their reaction? I considered that. I've been preparing my entire life, I said quietly. This is just the first time I'm honest about it. He leaned back, exhaled slowly. All right, he said, then we'll do this properly. The process took weeks. Not because I hesitated, but because I wanted it airtight. I completed evaluations, recorded statements, signed documents in the presence of witnesses, everything done calmly, transparently, intentionally. No secrecy. No coercion. No doubt. The irony was almost laughable. I had never been more mentally clear than I was in those weeks. Grief had stripped everything unnecessary away. What remained was focus. And peace. The hardest part wasn't making the decisions. It was keeping quiet. Every time one of my children called with small talk, I said nothing. Every time they casually mentioned the future, I listened without correcting them. Not out of fear. Out of resolve. They had already decided who I was in their lives. I was simply accepting it. One evening, my niece stopped by with groceries. She didn't ask for anything. She didn't stay long. She just hugged me and said, I wanted to make sure you weren't alone tonight. That was it. No agenda. No planning. Just care. As she left, I sat down at my desk and looked at the folder Mr. Calder had given me. Everything was finalized. Filed. Done. And I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. Because no matter what happened next, my life was finally aligned with reality. I thought the hard part was over. I was wrong. Because once people believe something belongs to them, they don't let go quietly. I noticed the change slowly. Not all at once. Not in a dramatic moment. It crept in through casual comments, offhand remarks, and conversations that felt premature. Like they were talking about a future where I wasn't quite included. It started with a group text. My eldest daughter shared photos of a kitchen remodel. Something like this would really modernize the lake place, she wrote. No question mark. No what do you think, Mom? Just an assumption. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. The lake house wasn't for sale. It wasn't transferred. It wasn't even discussed. Yet here they were, debating countertops like they were already owners. I didn't respond. Not because I was afraid, but because I was watching. And what I saw unsettled me. Over the next few weeks, the messages multiplied. My son asked about insurance paperwork. My youngest mentioned streamlining assets. They talked timelines, market conditions, transfer processes, always carefully framed as concern. Never once as permission. It felt like overhearing strangers divide up your belongings while you sat in the same room. And the strangest part, they spoke as if they were helping me. One afternoon, my daughter called. Mom, you've been quiet lately. I've been busy, I replied. Well, we're just worried, she said. You're on your own now, it's a lot. A lot. That word carried weight. I'm managing, I said. That's what worries us, she replied. You shouldn't have to manage everything alone. I almost laughed. They hadn't worried when I was alone. They worried now, when decisions were involved. The conversations became less subtle. What's your plan for the house? Have you thought about selling while the market's strong? Wouldn't it be easier if we handled some things? Handled. That word again. I realized something chilling. They weren't checking on my well-being. They were checking on my timeline. Then came the funeral reception for Elaine. I was holding a paper cup of coffee, standing near the window, when my son approached. So, he said, lowering his voice, have you thought about what happens next? I blinked. Next. With everything, he clarified. The properties, the accounts, we should probably sit down as a family soon. At my sister's funeral, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not grief. Detachment. The kind that comes when the truth finally settles. After that, the entitlement stopped hiding. My daughter sent links to renovation contractors. My youngest asked about transferring deeds to avoid complications later. My son suggested I move closer to him, freeing things up. Freeing things up. As if my existence was an obstacle. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I didn't defend myself. I documented. Dates, messages, calls. Because somewhere deep down, I knew this wasn't going to end with polite conversations. The moment that confirmed it came on a Sunday afternoon. No call. No warning. I heard multiple cars pull into my driveway. I looked out the window and felt my stomach drop. All three of them. Together. That never happened unless something was planned. Before I could reach the door, they let themselves in. Papers in hand. Determined expressions. We need to talk, my eldest said, already moving toward the dining table. I stood there, heart pounding, watching my children take control of my home like they belonged there. My son spoke first. Mom, this isn't an argument. This is about being practical. My youngest slid documents across the table. We just want to make things easier for you, she said. Power of attorney forms. Property management agreements. Pre-filled. Prepared without me. Without my consent. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't panic. I asked one simple question. When did you decide I needed saving? Silence. Then irritation. You're being defensive, my daughter snapped. We're trying to help you. Help? That word felt hollow now. I told them to leave. They laughed at first, like I was joking. Then they saw my face. That's when the tone changed. Threats crept in. Legal language appeared. Words like competency floated through the air. And in that moment, I understood exactly what this was. Not love. Control. They left angry. I locked the door with shaking hands. And then I did the smartest thing I'd done in years. I called my attorney. Because what they didn't know was that I had already handled everything. They thought showing up with papers would scare me. What they didn't realize was this. I was already prepared for war. The phone rang twice before my attorney answered. Tell me exactly what happened, he said. I paced my living room as I spoke, my voice steadier than I felt. I described the surprise visit, the documents, the way my own children spoke to me like I was already incapable of making decisions. There was a pause on the line. That's serious, he said finally, and it's not over. Those words settled deep in my chest. Over the next few days, the pressure didn't ease. It intensified. My eldest daughter called first, her tone carefully controlled. "Mom, we didn't mean to upset you. You just reacted emotionally." Emotionally. A familiar dismissal. "If you just sign the paperwork," she continued, "everything would calm down. We could help manage things and avoid bigger problems later." I asked one question. "What problem are you trying to solve?" She didn't answer. The call ended shortly after. Then my son tried a different approach. He showed up alone, unannounced, bringing groceries like a peace offering. "I'm worried about you," he said, sitting across from me. "This house is a lot, you're under stress. Let us take some responsibility." Responsibility. I looked at him and realized he believed what he was saying. Not because it was true, but because it benefited him. "You weren't worried when I needed emotional support," I replied. "Why now?" He frowned. "That's not fair." It was completely fair. When persuasion didn't work, frustration followed. My youngest sent long messages filled with concern, guilt, and subtle warnings. What if something happens to you? What if you make decisions you regret? What if we're forced to step in legally? That last line was the giveaway. Forced. My attorney advised me to document everything. So I did. Every text, every voicemail, every visit. I installed cameras, changed locks, not out of paranoia, but protection. Because something had shifted. They weren't asking anymore. They were positioning. Then came the public pressure. One morning, a distant cousin called. "I saw your daughter's post," she said gently. "Are you okay?" Post. I opened social media and found it. A long, emotional message about a mother who was struggling, isolating herself, and refusing help. Comments poured in praising my daughter's devotion. I read it twice. Then I understood. They were building a narrative. One where they were the rescuers, and I was the problem. I felt a flicker of fear. Not because I doubted myself, but because I knew how convincing stories can be when repeated often enough. I called my attorney immediately. "They're setting the stage," he said, "but so are we." He reminded me of what I had already done. Evaluations, documentation, intent. "They can't take what they don't legally control," he said, "and you've done everything right." For the first time since the ambush, I slept through the night. Still, the messages kept coming. Demands disguised as concern. Warnings dressed as love. Until finally, they crossed a line I couldn't ignore. A group text lit up my phone. "We're going to the lake house this weekend," my eldest wrote. "We need access, it's time." Time. As if they were announcing something inevitable. I stared at the message, heart pounding. Then my son added, "We deserve to use it too." Deserve. That word told me everything. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I didn't respond at all. Instead, I made one phone call. "They're coming to the lake house," I told my attorney. There was a brief silence. Then he said something that surprised me. "Good," he said calmly. "I'll meet you there." That night, I packed a small bag and drove up early the next morning. The lake was quiet, untouched, exactly the way my husband and I had loved it. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, memories pressing in from every corner. This place had held our family together once. Now it would reveal who they'd become. My attorney arrived shortly after, briefcase in hand. We sat at the old dining table, documents neatly arranged. We waited. Because when people believe something belongs to them, they always show up expecting to take it. They were certain this would be a confrontation they'd win. What they didn't know was that this time, I wasn't facing them alone. The lake house was silent that morning. No laughter. No footsteps. Just the soft sound of water against the dock and the slow creak of old wood settling. I stood by the window, watching the mist lift off the lake, and realized how strange it was that peace and confrontation could exist in the same place. My attorney sat at the table behind me, flipping through documents with the calm focus of someone who had done this many times before. "They'll try a motion first," he said. "If that fails, they'll escalate." I believed him, because I had already seen both. The week leading up to that Saturday had been relentless. My eldest sent messages late at night, long ones, full of regret and revisionist history. "We didn't mean it that way. You know we love you. You're misunderstanding our intentions." Each message ended the same way. "Let's just talk in person." Talk. That word had become a weapon. My son tried another approach. He called my doctor. Not to check on my health, but to ask questions about my capacity to make decisions. The office called me afterward, concerned. That's when I understood something critical. They weren't worried about losing me. They were worried about losing control. My youngest followed with fear. What if they force us to intervene? What if we don't act and something happens? What if the court decides for us? Every message painted urgency. Every message pushed toward the same outcome. Authority. I didn't respond. Not once. Because my attorney had made one thing clear. Silence is powerful when the truth is documented. And mine was. He explained everything again that morning at the lake house. "They've created a story," he said, "but stories collapse under evidence." He laid out the files. Medical evaluations. Video statements. Witness signatures. And then, my favorite part. A timeline. Texts where they dismissed my grief. Messages where they planned renovations. Threats disguised as concern. All neatly organized. All undeniable. "I need to ask you something," he said, looking at me seriously. I nodded. "When they react badly, which they will, are you ready to hold your ground?" I thought of Elaine. Of sitting alone after the funeral. Of being told to handle it myself. "I already have," I said. The sound of engines broke the quiet. 3 cars. Pulling in almost together. Right on time. I felt my heart race, but it wasn't fear. It was clarity. Through the window, I watched them step out laughing, unloading bags, pointing toward the water like they were arriving for a vacation. They brought their families. Children, coolers, groceries. They truly believed this was already theirs. My attorney closed his folder and stood. "Let me do the talking at first," he said. I nodded. There was a knock. Then another. Then the handle turned. It didn't open. I had changed the locks weeks earlier. Confusion spread across their faces. My eldest knocked again, harder. "Mom," she called, "why isn't the door opening?" I opened it slowly. Their smiles faded when they saw him. Suit, briefcase, calm expression. "What's he doing here?" my son asked. "I was invited," my attorney said evenly. "Please come in." They stepped inside cautiously now. The energy shifted immediately. Gone was the confidence. Gone was the entitlement. Something heavier took its place. We gathered in the living room. Documents were laid out on the table. No yelling. No accusations. Just reality. My attorney spoke first. "Your mother has asked me to be present due to recent attempts to access property that does not belong to you. My eldest scoffed. Yet, she said, that word would come back to haunt her. I stayed silent, not because I was weak, but because this moment wasn't about emotion. It was about truth. And truth was finally ready to speak. They walked in expecting keys. What they got instead was the truth they'd been avoiding for months. The room felt smaller once they all stepped inside. Not because of the space, but because of the silence. My children stood in a loose line near the doorway, uncertainty written across their faces. The grandchildren lingered outside, confused, sensing something was wrong. The laughter they'd arrived with had evaporated. My attorney gestured toward the chairs. Please, he said calmly, let's sit. They hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. For the first time, they weren't in control. What is this about? My eldest asked, crossing her arms. This, my attorney replied, placing a folder on the table, is about boundaries and property. My son scoffed. We're family. Why are lawyers involved? I almost answered. But my attorney spoke first. Because family does not arrive with entitlement and demands. That shut him up. For now. My youngest tried a softer tone. Mom, this is unnecessary. We just want to use the lake house like we always have. Always. I stared at her. You mean when you were children, I said finally. Before you stopped visiting, before you stopped calling. She looked away. My attorney opened the folder. Let me be clear, he said. None of you have legal ownership, access rights, or authority over this property. That's not true, my eldest snapped. We're beneficiaries. He looked up slowly. Were, he corrected. The room froze. What do you mean were? My son asked. My attorney turned a page. In March of this year, your mother revised her estate plan. March. I watched their faces shift. Confusion. Alarm. Fear. You never said anything, my youngest whispered. I wasn't required to, I replied. My eldest stepped forward. You changed everything because we were busy. I shook my head. No, I changed everything because you showed me who I was to you. She laughed sharply. This won't hold up. My attorney didn't react. Your mother underwent independent evaluations, he said. All results confirm full capacity. All decisions were documented, witnessed, and recorded. My son's face reddened. So what, this is punishment? I met his eyes. No, this is clarity. The folder slid across the table. The lake house, my attorney continued, has been designated to someone who maintained a meaningful relationship with your mother and respected the property. My eldest's voice rose. Who? I didn't hesitate. My niece. Silence exploded. You gave it to her, my son shouted. She was there, I said calmly, when I needed someone. My youngest shook her head. This is insane. No, I said. What's insane is planning renovations for a house you don't own. My attorney wasn't finished. The remainder of the estate will be distributed to charitable trusts and educational funds. And us, my eldest demanded. He paused. You will each receive a modest, deliberate inheritance. How modest? My son asked. $1,000, my attorney said evenly. The reaction was instant. Laughter. Anger. Disbelief. After everything, my eldest cried. I spoke softly. Everything was me giving. This is me choosing. My youngest's voice broke. You're choosing strangers over us. I shook my head. I'm choosing respect. They tried threats next. Court. Challenges. Public opinion. My attorney answered each one calmly. This will not succeed. Documentation is extensive. Any challenge will be costly. Their confidence drained with every sentence. My eldest stood abruptly. You're destroying this family. I looked at her and felt peace. No, I said. I stopped pretending. They turned toward the door. My youngest hesitated. Was it worth it? She asked quietly. I thought of the phone calls that never came. The grief I carried alone. The silence. Yes, I said, it was. They left without another word. The door closed behind them. And for the first time in a long time, the lake house felt peaceful again. I thought that was the end. I was wrong. Because when entitlement is exposed, it doesn't disappear quietly. I didn't celebrate after they left. I didn't feel victorious. What I felt was something heavier and quieter. Relief mixed with grief. Because no matter how necessary it was, watching your own children walk out in anger leaves a scar. The first call came less than an hour later. My phone buzzed while I was still sitting at the dining table, staring at the grain in the wood. It was my eldest. I didn't answer. A voicemail followed. You've been manipulated, she said. This isn't over. I saved it. The next few days were relentless. Messages poured in. Angry ones. Crying ones. Threatening ones. My son accused me of betrayal. My youngest accused me of favoritism. They all accused me of cruelty. None of them asked how I felt. That part hurt more than the accusations. Then the public pressure returned. Another post appeared online, carefully worded this time. A story about heartbreak. About a mother cutting off her children. About being shut out without explanation. Friends and distant relatives started calling again. Are you okay? Do you need help? Maybe you should talk to them. I listened politely. Then I stopped engaging. Because I finally understood something. People believe the story that protects their comfort. My attorney handled the legal responses. Formal letters were sent. Documentation was shared. Boundaries were enforced. Within days, the tone shifted. Threats became questions. Questions became silence. The narrative they'd built couldn't survive facts. One evening, my niece called. Her voice was hesitant. They contacted me, she said. I told them I didn't want to be involved. I'm sorry, I said. She paused. Don't be, I'm proud of you. Those words mattered more than she knew. A week later, a letter arrived. A formal notice of intent to contest the estate. My attorney smiled when he read it. This won't go far, he said. And he was right. The challenge dissolved quietly. Too much evidence. Too little ground. They retreated. The silence that followed was strange. No calls. No messages. No sudden concern. Just absence. It confirmed everything. When access disappeared, so did interest. I spent the holidays differently that year. Not loudly. Not traditionally. I cooked with my niece. We laughed. We remembered Elaine. We watched old movies and talked until midnight. There was no agenda. No planning. Just presence. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was performing my role as mother. I was just myself. One night, as I stood by the lake, I thought about the question my youngest had asked. Was it worth it? The answer surprised me. Because it wasn't about winning. It was about peace. I slept better. I breathed easier. I no longer waited for phones that wouldn't ring. Months later, a short message came from my son. We didn't expect this. I stared at it for a long time. Then I replied with 3 words. I needed respect. He didn't respond. I don't know what the future holds. Reconciliation may come. Or it may not. But I know this. I stopped betraying myself to preserve an illusion. And that changed everything. People ask if I regret it. The truth is, I only regret not choosing myself sooner. People assume the ending of a story like this is loud. Courtrooms, screaming matches, dramatic reconciliations. But the truth is quieter than that. The real ending arrived in silence. After everything settled, days passed without messages or calls. The quiet no longer felt heavy, it felt intentional. For the first time in years, my phone wasn't something I stared at hoping it would light up. I stopped measuring my worth by who remembered me. That alone changed how I slept at night. I won't pretend it didn't hurt. Losing daily contact with your children, even adult children, is a grief no one prepares you for. I still catch myself reaching for the phone when something small happens. A funny memory, a moment I would have once shared. Then I stop. And I breathe. Because chasing people who only notice you when they want something slowly erodes your soul. One afternoon, a neighbor asked me something unexpected. Are you happier now? The question caught me off guard. Happier. I thought about it carefully. I'm more peaceful, I said, and that matters more. And it does. The lake house is quiet now, but not empty. My niece visits often. She doesn't change anything. She doesn't rush. She treats the place like a memory that deserves respect. We sit on the porch and talk about Elaine, about life, about what it means to choose yourself after decades of putting others first. She once told me, "You taught me that love doesn't mean surrender." I didn't even realize I'd learned that lesson myself until she said it. Sometimes people ask if I feel guilty for choosing charities over children, for refusing to give in, for standing my ground. The answer surprises them. I don't. Because guilt is what keeps people trapped in roles that hurt them. And I was done playing mine. There are still moments of sadness. Birthdays pass quietly. Holidays feel different. But different doesn't mean worse. It means honest. And honesty is lighter than obligation. The biggest lesson I learned isn't about money. It's about boundaries. About recognizing when love becomes transactional. About understanding that being someone's mother doesn't mean being their asset. I didn't stop loving my children. I stopped letting that love be used against me. If there's one thing I want you to take from this, it's this. You don't owe anyone access to your life just because they share your blood. You owe yourself dignity. And sometimes, choosing yourself feels like loss until you realize what you've gained. I handled it myself, just like they told me to. And in doing so, I reclaimed something far more valuable than property or money. My peace. If this story resonated with you, you're not alone. Subscribe, share your thoughts, and remember, choosing yourself is not betrayal.